Welcome back to this special edition of the Ingraham Angle. One of the most divisive issues in America today is the forced removal of historic statues. While some want to preserve our nation's history, others say these figures are not worthy of remembrance given their support of slavery or the Confederacy. Case in point, a group of students at Hofstra University on Long Island want Thomas Jefferson, his statue outside the Student Center, removed because our nation's third president owned slaves. And last year, the city of New Orleans removed several Confederate statues. Here's what New Orleans Democrat Mayor Mitch Landrieu had to say about this issue earlier today.
You can't change history by taking a statue down. You're just moving it to another place. These particular monuments occupy prominent places and reflect only 4 years of New Orleans' 300 years history, crowding out all of the other history.
Joining me now for a reaction is Fox News correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera, author of The Geraldo Show, a memoir. And with me here on set is Fox News political analyst Gianno Caldwell. All right, Geraldo, let's start with you on this. Mitch Landrieu has had a number of statues removed in the dark of night, and these are statues that have been there for a long time. They're worth multi-million dollars, and we don't even know, I guess, where most of them are. P.T. Beauregard, other statues, don't know where they are. They're just gone. What's your take on this? Is this the right way to handle these historical monuments?
Well, putting aside what's happening in New Orleans, and I really do like Mayor Landrieu. I think that he's a very thoughtful man. I think his family has a real roots, real cred when it comes to New Orleans and Louisiana history, generally speaking. But remember, Laura, I resigned from my fellowship at Calhoun College at Yale University a year or so ago when they changed the name, taking John C. Calhoun's name off the college and naming it for a more contemporary person. I fear when history starts being rewritten constantly through the prism of political correctness and contemporary thought, that we risk cutting ourselves off from our roots. Now, I absolutely get that slavery, this abomination, is different than a lot of things that happen in political life. This is something like the Holocaust that can't be forgiven, but I think that to try and continually rewrite history, Jefferson was a slave owner, so was George Washington. What will happen when the entire first third of our history is cut off or in some way covered up, Laura?
John.
Well, there's levels, as I see it. You have the Confederate statues, ones of generals, and if you look at the history of the generals, most of those guys, they were military, generally speaking, and that was pretty much it. So you got these statues in public squares of individuals who fought to really divide our country. And when you look at it from that perspective, I think it gives a greater degree of understanding why statues like that should really be in museums. Now, when it comes to somebody like Thomas Jefferson, for example, he's much more than a slave owner. That was a past sin of his, but this is somebody who had a hand in creating a Declaration of Independence, and he said all men are created equal. In addition to that, he was a president, he was a governor, he was a Secretary of State. So this is an individual I think that we can celebrate, although he did have past sins. These other individuals, however, their past sins was the majority of their career from the viewpoint of having a Confederate statue.
You know, P.T. Beauregard, General Beauregard, is one of those generals who did so much after the war. He helped build schools for minority children, and he did so much work to try to bring the fabric of the community together. I mean, he was a beloved person post-war. So, yes, sins of slavery, horrific. An entire lifespan, maybe not so much with everyone. And I agree with Geraldo that painting every historical figure that was living in the South at the time and might have even fought in the war with this brush of put him away, take him away in the middle of the night, put it somewhere we don't even know, I think that does not serve us all that well. And look, I'm not a black person. I don't know how it feels to walk by one of these statues and maybe you're told this person hated you and didn't think you were a real person. I can't imagine that. But I do think people who especially worked for a reconstruction or forgiveness, for bringing and healing the country, especially those people, I think we're on a real slippery slope if we start saying, like, and look, these Hofstra students, they're serious. They were serious at Princeton about Woodrow Wilson, a great internationalist, Democrat hero. Now, Woodrow Wilson has to go off the Wilson Center. This is what one of the Hofstra students said on Fox News. The right to peaceful protest and assembly is at the core of our democracy. Hofstra supports our students' right to engage in peaceful demonstrations about issues that matter to them. We look forward to the continuing civil exchange of ideas on the subject. That's what their statement was to Fox News. But it looks like groups of students mobilized at Princeton University, not successfully yet. But I think it's a matter of time before Thomas Jefferson gets put in that same place as Robert E. Lee, who past American presidents, including FDR, hailed as one of the greatest generals we've ever had, one of the greatest Christian gentlemen we've ever had. That's FDR's commemoration of Robert E. Lee. So this is a wild territory we're in, and I don't know where it ends, guys.
And I would have to disagree with you. I think it's a slippery slope if we're continuing to put these individuals, these Confederate generals, in similar categories as Thomas Jefferson. They are not in similar categories as Thomas Jefferson. You have individuals who really founded our country, Christian principles. You talk about Robert E. Lee, Democrats who look to destroy the fabric of our very country. And yes, African Americans see
this as a problem. He didn't own slaves. His wife did, though.
African Americans see this as a problem because you see many that celebrate this and not put it in its proper categorization. So if you want to put it in a museum, by all means, we can't erase our history, and I understand that. Certainly not, but we should be celebrating it in public squares and allowing for people to think that it was nothing wrong with it.
Should we rename Washington, D.C.?
You know, Laura, just going back to...
Oh, he owned slaves not too far from here. We had multiple
I get it.
Thousands of acres of land.
John C. Calhoun in the 1950s was voted one of the 5 greatest senators in American history by an elite Senate panel that included John F. Kennedy. So Senator Kennedy was one of those who picked John Calhoun as one of the great Senate. That was in the 1950s. My fear is that as contemporary mores and values and who's in and who's out change, will continually be erasing. History will have to be written in pencil rather than in ink. And I don't think that gets anyone anywhere. But I will say this much. There was a time in this country at the beginning of the reaction to Reconstruction, the beginning of Jim Crow, where statues were erected specifically to stick it to black people, to let them know who was still boss and who was subordinate. Those statues, I think, when you know, they may have the facade is a historic monument, but the real purpose is a racialist social statement rather than a historic remembrance. And I think that you can look at them, it's easy to find their provenance, their history, and determine how you feel about them based on that.
All right, guys, great segment.